Welcome back to the Epic Universal podcast with Eric Hersey. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And special show, folks. This is our last show before Christmas. And it's also a special show because my co-host Eric Hersey has just returned from enjoying the holidays at the Universal Orlando Resort. And we're going to talk at length about that on this week's show, right?
Right, Jim. It was our first time for the holidays. Obviously, we're still rookies. We're still learning, but I was probably most excited about this trip because of all the holiday atmospheric things that are going down at Universal. So we have a fun, interesting tie-in and story of how we ended up doing all of the things and some purchases, pre-Christmas purchases we made along the way. So I'm excited to share that with everyone today.
Okay, can't wait to get to that. But before we do that, we have to acknowledge our sponsor here. And the Epic Universal podcast is, of course, sponsored by TouringPlans.com. Touring Plans helps you save time and money at theme parks like Universal and Walt Disney World. So please check them out at TouringPlans.com. And teeny bit of news before we get started here. We have a new admissions media being offered by Universal Orlando. Is that correct?
Right, Jim. And this ties very well because this is what suckered us in many aspects. So let me just tell you first, for everybody out there that's looking to visit, there is a buy 2 days and get 2 days free ticket deal going on. And that is basically going, if you travel now through April 30th of 2025, you buy 2 tickets, you get 2 tickets for free. And that goes to access to the Universal Studios Florida and Islands of Adventure. So not a bad deal, especially when you're looking at it. So let me tie that directly in. And you can find more information about that online. And it almost prompts you when you're trying to buy tickets all about it. Because that is kind of how we ended up going to Universal for multiple days throughout this trip.
Okay, interesting.
So I kind of mentioned, I think on the last show, that we had it scheduled to, this was a Disney vacation that we booked through our DVC. We booked DVC and we had this planned out for 11 months from now. But as annual pass holders, there was a block out and it was on November 30th. And at that point in time, I was like, hey, we're traveling down there. We're not able to get into the theme park. Lauren, what do you think about us going to Universal? And that was just a no-brainer at this point in time. It's like, if I'm going down to Florida, we do a podcast about Universal. You think I'm not going to head into the parks at this point in time?
Okay.
So I sold her on that pretty easily. Right. Oh, yeah, we'll all go over there. And it's a family of 5. So we kind of looked at it and we booked one night because we were going to get down there earlier, and we booked at Endless Summer and at Dockside, Endless Resort. Have you seen or stayed there, Jim? I know it's a relatively new, if not the newest, right?
Yes. In fact, when they did a podcast familiarization trip, I want to say 3 years ago, they had a stay there. In fact, what was so bizarre is we were down there to sample the Halloween event, but they had us recording podcasts in the studio right there in Hollywood Boulevard. And I remember coming out after interviewing the folks who had just finished working on the Velocicoaster, and walked out to Hollywood Boulevard, and they were training the folks who were driving the Christmas floats.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it just was so bizarre we just saw the Halloween mazes, and here are the lit up full size Christmas floats rolling through the streets. It's like, okay, well, I guess they got to train them sometime, but
right. And they're starting Christmas earlier and earlier every
there
year.
we go.
But no, so we stayed there, and we stayed in slept 6 people, and it was so roomy. Yeah. And I was, and if you don't know, it's a little bit off. Like it's slightly outside of like the Universal bubble.
Well, I mean, you are. What's interesting is they built it. They bought the site of the old Wet n Wild water park on I Drive, and built that understanding that at some point in the future, this would be the resort that actually sits equidistant, basically, between the Epic Universe Park and the main campus with Islands of Adventure and the studios. So it is on the frontier now, but if we jump ahead even a year, that's the resort that's almost ridiculously conveniently positioned between the two properties.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this, Jim. It was such a seamless,
Mhm.
like, the bus system and getting to the actual city walk,
Mhm.
it seemed quicker and easier than even when we stayed at Cabana Bay in
You
July.
I actually it's so funny you mentioned that because I've had Universal team members flat out tell me that because of the stoplights on property when you're moving from Cabana Bay over to the entrance security, checkpoint that you have to get through, it is actually faster
Right?
from Endless Summer.
So if I'm just gonna I mean, I'm not gonna go to I didn't get we stayed one night. I didn't get but it was so roomy, it was
Mhm.
comfortable,
Mhm.
and it was easy to get to. I would say that we would easily stay there again. And slept 6 because we
Mhm.
we go and there's 5 of us in our family, and we always bring Lauren's mom. So it was easy sleep 6, and I would recommend that as a great option, and it was super affordable
Uh
compared to what you would have to pay elsewhere,
Okay,
right?
and one quick story there. I literally now, mind you, he said this off the record, so I can't identify the Universal exec who told me
It
about.
was Earl the Squirrel, Jim,
There
wasn't
we
it?
go,
No.
Earl the Squirrel. Yes, that rodent can't keep a secret. But basically, when they built Endless Summer, they in fact they warned the other properties around there that look, no, sorry, I know this is going to hurt your bottom line, but we're going to operate this hotel at a loss deliberately for 7 years with the notion of we want people to come here and have such a great time and enjoy the facilities and that sort of thing. We're willing to take the loss on paper to get people to bond with this resort so that in the future, when they come to Orlando, it's like, oh, I want to go back to Endless Summer. I want to stay there. I love the rooms. I love the pool. I love the food court and all that.
It worked. It worked for and believe me, we were going from this to the
Mhm.
Polynesian off our DVC points.
Mhm.
So and we were like, "Oh man, this was way more roomy and it was convenient and it was and we're equal. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later.
Okay.
Like you don't have to be tribal. You can like Disney and Universal
You can.
and we are very much in that boat.
Mhm.
But to get back to the story here,
Okay.
1 day ticket. We
Mhm.
wanted to buy 1 day ticket, and we were going to do the Hollywood or we were going to do the holiday like
Mhm.
premiere thing, so we could park to park.
Okay.
We looked at that, and then Lauren's like, "Hey, they got a deal if you buy two."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Hey, we're down here. I don't mind driving from Disney property to Universal 1 day, and then
Mhm.
don't have to do the park to park,
Mhm.
right? We can just get 2 tickets." She's like, "Oh, it's 4 days,"
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Man, I don't know. We're staying at the Poly. We're on the monorail. That's when you take advantage of the Magic Kingdom." I'm like, I don't know if we could do 4 days,
Mhm.
but ultimately we ended up buying that 2 day thing. And so we're like, hey, we literally can go half day. If we get sick and tired of Disney or whatever, we can easily go over
Mhm.
and do another day, even a half day, because now we can do 4. And it was just a good deal.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're going to cut forward that we just came to the realization we just put this money down and
Yep.
bought 2 days worth of tickets. We
Mhm.
got 4 days worth of tickets. And we just said, what's the price of an annual pass?
Mhm.
Now that we know you can buy, annual pass holders can get a 1 day ticket to Epic because
Mhm.
we're going to go back in June to go to Epic. We're like, what's the price? So we go to guest relations and they
Mhm.
explain everything wonderfully to us. The
Mhm.
difference is the blackout dates, what you get, so forth.
Mhm.
We drive. So we knew that we're going to save in parking. If you
Mhm.
buy a preferred pass, you
Mhm.
get 10% off your dining and merchandise.
Mhm.
So let's just put it this way. We left the guest counter basically with annual passes, went back to the kids, said, hey, you just got an extra Christmas present. So now we're universal pass holders. And it all started because of this buy 2 days, get two free.
Wow. Okay. Well, someone in the admission media promotion department is breaking their hand back, patting themselves on the back right now. We got another one. Yay!
They did.
Okay.
I don't think it was a hard get because I think if you're doing a universal podcast
Mhm.
on a weekly basis, I probably it's not hard for me to buy more tickets. But so we were excited there, but we were there primarily to experience the holidays, and that's kind of the one things we talked about. So we
Mhm.
talked a couple episodes ago about what's going on.
Mhm.
So Jim, I didn't believe that I could spend 5 to 6 hours just in Seuss Landing, but that's what ended up happening. That's a lot of time in Seuss
Yeah.
Landing. I
Yeah.
started talking in rhymes.
Mhm.
My spine started curving. There was no straight lines in me at all.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
so, but Jim, did
Mhm.
you have you witnessed any of Seuss Landing during the holidays at all? I think it's their bread and
Oh,
butter.
yeah, that in fact, when I was down there once, they actually took me backstage and I got to watch them apply. They have the walk around Who's.
Oh, yes, and they were lovely.
Yeah, but at the same time, they have that weird little snout from the Ron Howard movie.
Right.
And I got to interview one of the employees, to me, the team members who did this, and said, "Okay, is that tough to wear?" I said, "Well, yeah, when you've got a cold."
Yeah. Yeah.
You go backstage and you lift that thing off, and it's like, oh, petri dish. So.
Well, we did, and since you were talking about, they did have lovely Who's that were walk-arounds, and it was the highlight of my daughter's trip because she's a 14-year-old, and I mean, she's not easy impressed,
Okay.
but she came over and they essentially interacted with her and made her, hold on to like this ribbon. They made her into a tree, and they grabbed Miles and threw him in there. It was just great interacting. They were wacky. We were eating at the Circus McGurkus Cafe.
I am so happy that you got to do this. I have so many trips I have been down there, and Circus McGurkus has been closed.
Oh, no, Jim. This is the sleeper hit for us. Now,
Okay.
granted, I will tell everyone out there, I'm not a foodie.
Okay.
I'm not someone who criticizes food. I will literally eat almost anything you throw in front of me. So when I say the food is good, the foodies out there, don't harass me ever on this podcast because that's not my vibe. I'm a graphic designer. I can tell you if a website looks good and marketing, but for food, I love the food, and it is all wacky and crazy. And we ate it the first day and everyone raved about it. So we ate it again. We had Circus McGurkus twice. And during the last time we ate at Circus McGurkus, we were actually by a window and the Who jumped up and smashed their face, and I saw their nose smush, and it startled us. I'm like, what the heck happened here? And they were just wacky and great. So we didn't get to meet the Grinch. The moment, every time we got there at 9:00, it was a 250-minute wait.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do it. Lainey really wanted it, but I couldn't do it. So we didn't get to meet the Grinch, but we did see the Holiday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the stage show.
Right, which was a great stage show. I loved it. But of course, me being the nerd of the bunch, I was really excited to go in the old Nickelodeon Studios building because that's how they route you from Seuss behind the stage. So you see all of the behind the stage. So you see the lots, and then they take you and you go right there. And it's still kind of painted for the old Blue Man Group show. It is. But and then I had to talk to my son who loves a little bit of Urban Explorer, and I'm talking my 7-year-old Miles who will go on YouTube to watch Urban Explorers, and I said, and he's like, "Can we go in this door over here?" And he's trying to get in the back access because he wants to find those old Ren and Stimpy like murals that are on the upstairs that he saw a YouTuber do. And I'm like, "No, Miles, we don't want to get kicked out of this park. We just paid to get in this park."
Okay, let me tell a story you can share with Miles, because again, I'm there. Universal was kind enough to invite me down as a guest. This is back when I was working for HuffPo. And so again, you not only get to see the Hula Day show, you get to chat with the cast and the creatives and that sort of thing. And at one point, I have to go to the little Who's room. So they take me backstage, and I'm standing there at the urinal. And then I swear to God, this is actually what happened. I'm standing at the urinal, and then suddenly standing on either side of me are two gentlemen wearing dark hoods over their heads and capes full off of their body. And it's like, and initially I was concerned, and then I got especially concerned because I could see their little Who noses sticking out of the hood. Yeah. And evidently that's how they have to dress when they're moving, in areas where prior to going on stage.
Right.
But again, two actors before they went on stage, well, we got to hit the little Who's room. And so, but again, it's like Dracula meets the Who's. This was a little concerning, but chatted with a press rep and said, yeah, that's how we dress them backstage. We don't want to freak people out.
Right. So, well, what's really funny is you mentioned the bathroom, and we watched an Easter egg video. So if you want any remnants of the old Nickelodeon studios, the only place you really can find it is in the bathroom, that on the tile floor, there is green gack.
There we go.
And we couldn't get I could not figure out. Miles was like, I got to go to the bathroom. I got to go. And I knew he was lying because he knew this. And I'm like, I don't know how to get over there, Miles. I'm in the middle of the row. I'm like, I can't do anything here. Okay. But my son is cut out of my cloth. I am not an urban explorer. I would love to see all the stuff the urban explorers do, but I don't condone it. But if you do, I like it when you put it on YouTube.
There we go. Okay.
But no, Jim, I thought the Grinchmas and the Hula Day was the highlight, minus Earl. And
Mhm.
if you don't know about that, listen to the previous episode.
Okay. Mhm.
But I do want to talk about a couple of the other things. So,
Okay.
Macy's Day Parade,
Mhm.
and you've seen this,
Yeah, yeah. I have to admit, the latest iteration of this parade. I mean, I've seen the Macy's parade when they actually brought balloons down from New York and featured them in the parade. And I know you're seeing the newer version with the Universal characters and the
right?
balloons that have been created just for that parade. And it sounds like you weren't exactly won over.
Yeah, I think it was. Firstly, it must have been a windy night because
Mhm,
the floats were really low, and I don't know if that's just by design because this is a theme park and they didn't
mhm,
necessarily think that they were going to have a bunch of balloons. But I do think that the music just doesn't get you as in the vibe as kind of like some of the other parades.
mhm,
And so it seemed it was fine. It was nice, but
mhm,
it seemed like, all right, here's a whole bunch of minions. And then we saw Madagascar and then it was Shrek. And I'm like, you got a lot of characters now
mhm,
to only focus on 3 IPs in this thing. I just felt like there was more variety. I personally like the Mega Movie Parade better
mhm.
if I had to choose between the two parades I've seen,
Okay, okay.
but it was still, I mean, it's obviously worth
Yeah,
sitting there.
this one is almost a decade old at this point, and you're not
Okay.
wrong. It's kind of like what Disney does. It's you run it till you've got a total return on investment on it, and
Right.
then so
But
what?
boy, wouldn't I kill to see a Jaws balloon, like,
Uh,
or an ET? Like, come on. Listen. So that was nice. And have you been able to witness the Magic at Christmas at the Hogwarts Castle? It's a projection show.
um, yeah, and I actually I have seen all of the projection shows at this point. In fact, I genuinely feel bad because they did one. In fact, the projection show that launched all of these was only shown, I want to say, at the opening for Hollywood and Japan and Orlando, and it featured clips from the actual films,
Okay.
and it was so much better. Also, I won't lie to you. The other reason it was so much better is John Williams was there with a full orchestra conducting in
Oh,
front of it.
oh, that's
Uh,
just a little better there.
a little bit better. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're charming in their own way, but it's also kind of a all right. I've seen that. I can move on now.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Jim, and that's funny that you mentioned because if my critique was that there were like no moments of the movie,
Yeah.
it was just like, all right, well, here's Ghost Carolers and this,
Mhm.
and then I'm like, okay, well, that was, but like we kind of, I don't know, I just wanted to see them in this in holiday gear or just talking
Yeah.
about it or Christmas music, so it was fine. It was nice. I will tell you,
Hmm.
we went in July and it was 90 degrees in Hogsmeade,
Yeah.
and this time it was like 40 to 50 degrees, and it actually
Yeah.
felt like Christmas. It was so much more enjoyable.
Hmm.
And I did get to catch the frog choir,
Hmm.
and they were singing carols, and I thought that was really cool.
Yep. Yep. Got to ask the obvious question here, though. That did you do the hot butter beer?
Right, Jim. That was the first and foremost. We bought literally. I think it was the first thing we did.
Okay.
And hot butter beer ranks. I say would rank second on the list. I am still a traditional butter beer guy.
Okay.
That is my number one. Hot butter beer number two, and then frozen butter beer. So
Okay.
in the list, and I will continue to add as we have time. We did
Hmm.
not get the ice cream butter beer this time because once again it was 40 degrees, and I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
Okay. Okay. No, no, no. Well, again, save that for the the July when
Right.
it's like you're standing on the sun and you want something cool. But
Right. And I think the last thing I'll talk about, we did talk about the tribute store and Earl kind of in previous episodes, and it was
mhm,
it was nice. I did get to try the onion. I
mhm.
said I would try the onion tart, the delectable and it was fine. And I thought it was great. Like the
Oh,
the the
okay.
Grinch onion
Mhm,
cheesecake tart, whatever the heck it was. So that was a nice little add-on to the holidays. But I think it was a great trip and very happy, would recommend doing the holidays
mhm,
at Universal any day for the Hula Day alone. I mean, the Grinch is so ingrained in our culture,
mhm,
and if there, you see mostly Harry Potter dress and robes because we pay attention to what people wear,
mhm.
but. If it was anything else, it was Grinch. So their IP is doing well, and they were selling lots of Grinch merchandise, and I saw lots of full grown adults in
Mhm.
Grinch onesies, which
Yeah, you're a brave soul. You know,
right, right,
if that's your, especially in Florida. But
right.
But all right, well, thank you so much for that overview of holidays at Universal in 2024. And just going to be interesting to see. Especially, I have to admit, I'm going to be fascinated to see the holiday program,
Oh.
because the interesting thing is we've just seen a taste. Uh, I don't know if you saw the images coming out of Universal Hollywood. They've just done their first decorating of
Mhm.
Mario World for
Yes.
the holidays,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I gotta say, if we jump ahead a full year now and think, wow, what's Burke gonna look like for the
Oh,
holidays?
wow. What's Frankenstein and the Mummy gonna look like with Christmas hats, you know?
Well,
Well, ugly Christmas sweater by the Wolfman. He can do it with his own chest hair.
all right. Well, on that note, folks, we're going to take a quick break here. But when we get back, we have a holiday related story to share that comes by way of a Universal or Epic Universal podcast listener, Stingray Travel. But first, this. And we're back. And as we mentioned at the top of the show here, this is our first Epic Universal podcast we've done before the holidays, and wanted to share something that Stingray Christmas reached out on X just a few days ago to share something that. Evidently, there's a daily Woody Woodpecker site,
Right, right.
and they
Follow
tweet.
them today.
There
You
we
get
go.
daily stuff of Woody Woodpecker when you're asking for that.
Okay, and but they tweeted out, frankly, Eric, an amazing photo. It's a picture of Walt Disney, and he's presenting animation producer Walter Lantz with a plaque which commemorates the 25th anniversary of that cartoon character's debut. Which, and by the way, just in case you're wondering, that happened in Knock Knock, which was a 7 minute long short that Lance produced and then Universal Pictures released back on November 25th, 1940. Uh,
Wow.
and this was an Andy Panda cartoon, and Woody was a supporting character in the animated short, but he stole the show, and it kind of a repeat what happened with Donald Duck and the Wise Little Hand, the silly symphony that Disney put out in June of 1934, and Donald stole the show in that, and just like Woody went on to get his own series. But anyway, Walt is presenting Walter Lantz with this plaque back in November of 1965, which again, I know this is going to blow people's mind, but it was this kind of golden age, Eric, of a cordial relationship between Universal and Disney. I mean, case in point, just 2 years earlier, Walt had lent Universal Ub Iwerks, and you know that name.
Yeah, of course.
He was a Disney Brothers Studio's best animator, and more to the point, he was a mechanical genius. Helped invent a lot of the great effects work at Disney Studios in the 40s into the 50s. And in fact, that's why Walt lent him out to Universal, because Alfred Hitchcock was trying to figure out how to do the birds in The Birds.
Right.
And Ub was the guy who came up with how you created all of those menacing flocks.
Wow.
Anyway, around this same time, Jules Stein, who is the man who founded MCA, which, by the way, had just acquired Universal Studios in 1962. This is when Stein is toying with the idea of creating the Universal Studio Tour. And so what's interesting is he asked Walt, who's his longtime friend, to come over and walk the lot with him. And it's like, I'm thinking of doing this. Do you think it would work? And Walt's like, oh God, yeah. And in fact, I know a guy, Harper Goff. He's the guy who did the Nautilus for our 20K movie, and he designed the Jungle Cruise, the ride in the boats for Disneyland. I bet he could do something great for you. And sure enough, he's the guy who designed the Glamour Tram, which, remember, just this past summer, Universal actually celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Glamour Tram by doing that commemorative popcorn bucket, which, bringing it full circle here, was driven by Woody
Right.
Woodpecker.
Right, and it's an old classic design. They
Yeah.
went to the old design. Yeah.
Yeah, but Jules Stein, very interesting man, son of Lithuanian immigrants. He put himself through college by playing, as he put it, both the violin and the saxophone very, very badly. But he had enough musical talent that he could make money on the weekends playing weddings and bar mitzvahs. So made enough money to put himself through the University of Chicago and then go on to get a degree at Rush Medical College. And talented enough guy, had enough on the ball. Eventually ended up as the chief resident of Cook County Hospital in Chicago. And by the way, after a year of studying in Vienna, then began specializing in ophthalmology. Now, but to circle back to that whole playing saxophone and violin very badly, he loves music. So he stops playing and starts managing bands.
Okay.
And he got so good at that because now remember, this is he's doing this in Prohibition in Chicago, where there's lots and lots of work for bands at speakeasies and the clubs where people could buy alcohol on the sly. So he's doing so well that he and two friends, Fred Ham and Ernie Young, they set up a music management company in 1924, 100 years ago. And they called their company the Music Corporation of America, or as it eventually became known, MCA.
Okay. All right. So that's how that came about. I always wondered where the acronym and why that all was in universal vernacular, but okay, great.
There we go. Okay, so if we jump ahead 10 years, now with the rise of radio, MCA is truly a powerhouse, and because Stein is representing some of the biggest bands in the country, like Benny Goodman and Guy Lombardo. And again, the fact that Benny Goodman, Guy Lombardo, the band leaders became celebrities, and sound pictures had come in. Now these guys are appearing in movies. And then he finds himself backing into, well, if you're representing band leaders in movies, you should represent singers in movies, and then you should represent actors who sing. So this is how he ends up representing people like Bing Crosby, Betty Grable, Frank Sinatra. And it's around the same time that Jules is now out in Hollywood, and he begins bumping into Walt Disney at like awards ceremonies and industry functions, and they recognize in each other kind of a kindred spirit. I mean, face it, Stein is an ophthalmologist who accidentally backs into this huge career as a powerful agent, and
Yeah.
Walt is an animator who, and by Walt's own admission, not a good animator. That's why he had a byword.
That's right. That was Ub's job. Yeah.
Yeah. So he eventually becomes this Academy Award winning producer who has his own studio. So you have two men who were kind of startled at how did I end up on this career path? But what was interesting is Walt begins using Jules as a soundboard. And in fact, at one point, he runs the idea of Disneyland by Stein. And Jules said, "This is an amazing idea. I would invest in this." And so Walt goes back to his brother Roy and says, "Hey, Jules says he would invest in this." And it's like, and because Stein, who is renowned as being one of the smartest guys in Hollywood, this is when Roy drops his reservations for Disneyland. It's like, okay, Stein says this is something he would invest in. Let's do this. Now, the interesting part of the story, the other supposedly smartest guy in Hollywood at that time, Bob Hope, who, by the way, took all of the money that he made off his radio show and those movies he made at Paramount, and then invested it in Southern California real estate and oil wells. He heard Walt's pitch for Disneyland and went, Anaheim? Anaheim? It's like, no one will go to Anaheim. And he turns him down. And Bob regrets it for the rest of his life. In fact, when Walt Disney World was announced in the early 1960s, Hope repeatedly goes to the Disney company and offers to fund the project, only to get turned down again. And in fact, it's worth noting that, fascinating bend on the story. When Disney broke ground for MGM Studio Tour, Bob Hope was there.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. And on opening day, when the park opened May 1st, 1989, Bob, along with Michael Eisner, personally escorted the first family into the park. And this was because at this point, all Hope wanted Disney to do was like, look, all right, like I have all of my props and my costumes, and I want to do a Bob Hope comedy museum. And could we make it part of your studio tour? And he kept trying to get involved with Disney, and could never pull it off. It just kind of is,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, that's well. I will tell you, he was in the grand opening special in
yep,
1971. He was
yep.
in the contemporary and made a bunch of jokes that don't necessarily play well now.
No, they don't.
But that is my favorite special of all time. Glenn Campbell and Mary Poppins herself, Julie Andrews. Is
There
so
we go.
so
There we
that's how
go.
I know Bob Hope at least.
Okay, there we go. All right, now back to Jules Stein. Um, the guy never forgot where he came from. More to the point, how he was originally supposed to be this doctor of ophthalmology. So this is why when UCLA is building its enormous medical complex in LA in the early 1960s, Stein funds the construction of what eventually became known as the Jules Stein Eye Institute, which at that time, Eric, was a state of the art facility for the treatment of eye related illness and injury. And Walt, recognizing that this was something really important that his friend had done and wanting to acknowledge that, he reaches out to Mary Blair. And she's just coming off of working on the original version of It's a Small World for the 1964 New York World's Fair, and also the relocated version of that same attraction that wound up at Disneyland Park. And Walt asked Mary to create a mural for the lobby of the pediatric section
Hmm.
of the Jules Stein Eye Institute. And by the way, you can go into that hospital today. And if you make your way to the children's ward, what's really great about this is that there's a tile there that recognizes Mary Blair's contribution. It literally says designed by Mary Blair, but there's also a tile there that acknowledges Walt's personal gift to his friend, a tile that reads, "To Doris and Jules Stein, with love, Walt Disney."
Wow, I'm looking at it now. I just pulled it up. It is amazing. It is very small world
Yep.
and
Oh,
something
yeah.
everybody should look at. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
even on the Walt Disney Family Museum website if
Yeah.
you're looking. So yeah, that's great.
No, no. Again, just a sweet gesture between two good friends, and but if how good are friends? Okay, Walt turned down all sorts of filmmakers, including Alfred Hitchcock, by the way, who were looking to make movies inside of Disneyland. But right after MCA bought Universal Studios in 1962, Walt gave the now owned by Jules Stein that studio permission to shoot 40 Pounds of Trouble inside of Disneyland. And Eric, have you ever seen this movie, this Tony Curtis movie?
I have not even heard of it, but it's on my list now because anything
Okay.
filmed at Disneyland, I'm going to want to watch.
Okay, so just to give you a little background, it's based on a 1932 Damon Runyon story. And you might know, I think the best known work of that's inspired by the wonderful stories that Damon Runyon wrote, of course, is the musical Guys and Dolls, which, by the way, they just
Okay.
announced they're making a movie version of. But anyway, the story's about this cute little girl who gets left behind as a marker with a bunch of gangsters by her dad, who's a gambler. And it was originally made as a Shirley Temple movie in 1934. 15 years later, it got remade as a Bob Hope, Lucille Ball movie called Sorrowful Jones. And 40 Pounds of Trouble was yet another remake of the story, only now, instead of being set in New York around Broadway, it's set in Reno. And what's fascinating about watching 40 Pounds of Trouble today is it's a snapshot of what Disneyland was like before Pirates, before New Tomorrowland. So, I mean, for example, you get to
Okay.
see the old Tomorrowland with like the Clock of the World, and
Oh yeah.
more to the point, you get to see Tony Curtis at one point is trying to get away from the film's big bad, who's a private investigator. And so he's actually running through Mine Train through Nature's Wonderland. And oh, by the way, also a very, very clearly set in the early 1960s film. In fact, at one point, Tony Curtis's character, the little girl, and his love interest, who's Susan Plachette, by the way, they're hiding from the private investigator because they've gone into a store at Disneyland and bought masks of Jack Kennedy, Fidel Castro, and Nikita Khrushchev. By the way, Walt first saw Suzanne Plachette on the set of 40 Pounds of Trouble and so liked her as a performer, he hired her right off of that movie to appear in Disney's not only The Ugly Dachshund, but the last movie that Walt, well, I think we've told this story, the last movie set he visited before he died, Blackbeard's Ghost.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, we were just talking about Bob Hope and the version of Little Miss Margaret that he appeared in, Sorrowful Jones, in 1949. But that's not the first movie he made that was based on a Damon Runyon story. There was also The Lemon Drop Kid, which was released by Paramount in April of 1951. And you typically hear about Lemon Drop Kid this time of year, Eric, because the score of the movie actually features the song Silver Bells, the Christmas song, It's Christmas Time in the City. That was written for that movie.
Okay.
And but there's a fascinating Disney tie to this movie. The Lemon Drop Kid features a storyline where there's this illegal casino, like a speakeasy, but the gangsters have found a unique way to hide it. They built it inside of this home for homeless old ladies. All right, and
okay.
So the gimmick of it is whenever the police show up to raid the place, the walls revolve and all of the one-armed bandits and the gaming tables go away and all the little cute little chairs with doilies and old ladies sitting in them appear.
So that's what was going on with the Golden Girls.
Well, there we go. There we go. But here's the thing. Imagineer Eddie Sato saw The Lemon Drop Kid and loved this movie as a kid. So much so that he ends up in charge of Main Street USA, the one that was being designed for Euro Disneyland. Early on, Eric, this was going to be set in the 1920s, and by the way, deliberately during Prohibition, so there were going to be gangsters. So again, weird. We're now back to when Jules Stein set up at MCA, and so what Eddie wanted to do was build a restaurant inside of the park that was just like this old lady's home. So the idea is you'd be sitting in this restaurant on Main Street in Euro Disneyland inside of a speakeasy, and you'd hear the police are outside. They're raiding the place. And the manager would reach over and pull a lever on the wall, and the walls would revolve. All right. And suddenly you're in a Christian Science reading room, and they put teapots down on the table because you're supposedly in a tea room. And the police would come in and make a very big show of looking around for gambling and drinking, and there's nothing going on. And they're like, oh, dang. And they'd leave. And as soon as they're out of the place, the manager would pull the lever and the walls would revolve. And it's back to the way that it was. And it sounded like it would have been so much fun.
Oh, that would have been great. That would have been so great.
But here's what happened. Michael Eisner, who, remember, was head of Paramount prior to going to Disney. And in 1987, Paramount released Brian De Palma's version of The Untouchables, which I don't know if you've ever seen this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so you remember the scene where Robert De Niro's Al Capone beats a guy to death with a baseball bat?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, that's Michael Eisner goes to go see Untouchables. Oh, hey, I remember when we put this project in motion, and I want to see what the finished film was like. And like, oh, I suddenly doing gangsters in a Disney theme park, it doesn't seem like a good idea. And by the way, to put a further weird bend on the story, when Jules Stein, again, remember, he's in Chicago, he's doing music for clubs in Chicago. He actually worked quite a bit with Al Capone. So,
oh, geez.
So anyway, so Eisner at this point goes, maybe we should not do the 1920s theme. Let's go back to what we do at the other Disney parks. Let's make the front part of the park turn of the century America. And so they revert to that. So today, if you go to Disneyland Paris, where the speakeasy would have been built is where they're I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a beloved restaurant even today, but that's where Waltz is on Main Street, where each of the rooms in the restaurant celebrates a different land in the park. But there's just a part of me that wouldn't it have been cool to be in that restaurant and just pull the
Oh,
lever and the walls
beautiful.
revolve. So
Yeah. Well, you get Jill Stein, I'm sure, was managing a band on the other side, and they would have been playing and pull the lever. And what do you know? You could have had Universal inside a Disney park, but it sounds like
yeah.
that, they kind of rested on each other, and Disneyland might not have been built if there wasn't some like Stein saying it. And the tour who
Mhm.
lands to Universal's studio in Florida and in Hollywood might not have happened if Walt didn't say it. So that's such a fascinating tale and nice little partnership there, but
Oh no,
we all
absolutely.
benefit.
We all benefit. By the way, though, it's worth seeking out if you can find the original version of Silver Bells. In I want to say they have it on YouTube from again this Bob Hope movie, and what's worth it alone is that you get to see William Frawley. Do you remember the character actor who played Fred Mertz on the Lucille Ball show?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, okay,
all
okay.
right, they have him as one of these street side Santas, the guys with the bell and the kettle,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the silver bells. It's time to put money in the kitty. So, but anyway, there's our pseudo holiday story that also acknowledges that once upon a time, Universal and Disney actually used to get along. So, go
Well,
figure.
no, that's fascinating. You know what, Jim? One of my favorite stories, and when we were working on your website a couple years ago, there's one story out there that I think people should seek out. It also has when Woody Woodpecker goes over to the walk around characters go to meet Mickey. They go to the I think that one day we should cover that story because that's
Oh,
pretty fascinating as
okay.
well.
That is the needle buried in the exact opposite direction.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
when
We're supposed to be happy on
oh
the
no
ending
no
of this, and
no
I'm like, no,
no.
tear it apart.
We can definitely circle back on that, but yeah, they got as didn't they get as far as the ticket and transportation
Yeah, it
center?
sounds like it. Yep. There's
Oh
pictures. There is a picture that
yeah,
is Woody Woodpecker and Mickey Mouse.
there
So
we
it's pretty
go.
cool. It's
There we
pretty
go.
cool. But no,
Okay.
Jim, thanks for that story. I appreciate it. And if you want more stories like that, we follow you over on Twitter, right? Jim, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me over on X and Instagram at Jim Hill Media and over on Facebook at Jim Hill Media. What about yourself, Eric? Where can they find
Oh,
you?
you can find me at Eric Hersey on Instagram X. And I did move over to Blue Sky as well. I'm everywhere.
Oh,
As a social media manager for an advertising agency, I kind of have to have social accounts everywhere. So
there
I've
you
done
go.
it all. So if you want to find me, you can find me there. And I share mostly pictures of theme parks as I find out.
Cool, cool.
And I think that's going to wrap things up, Jim. And like you mentioned earlier, that this is the last episode before the holidays. So
Mm.
I think on behalf of Jim and I, we would definitely want to wish you happy holidays and celebrate it with your friends and family. And we also have more coming up on the Jim Hill Media Network. So if you want to stick around, you'll hear what's coming up for the rest of the month and what's coming up here in January.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Len Testa or animation and movie news. Please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcasts, like The Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about podcasts and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.